This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's meeting of the London Assembly Budget and Performance Committee. Can I ask everyone to make sure that your phones, let me just check mine, turned off and switch to silent mode to avoid any interruptions. Before we get to our main business, let me just do a quick bit of housekeeping. Firstly, can I ask our clerk, Hannah Barwell, if any apologies have been received?
Thank you, Clerk. Apologies have been received from Assemblymember Harani and Assemblymember Polanski, for whom Assemblymember Moema and Assemblymember Hamdash are attending as substitutes respectively. There has also been apologies from Assemblymember Roberts, for whom Assemblymember Bakari is attending as substitute, and Assemblymember Wilson has also sent his apologies, and Assemblymember Moema is attending remotely on Zoom.
Good. Hope you caught all that. Can I ask the committee to note the recommendations set out at item 2 and ask if members have any other interest to declare? No. Good. Can I ask the committee to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 1st of June 2026 to be signed by me as a correct record? Agreed. Good. And can I ask the committee to note the ongoing actions arising from its previous meetings and the additional correspondence received? Noted. Good. That now brings us to our main item this morning, which is the GLA Land and Property Limited. So if I could oh, my notes are missing half the people. I'll have to hope my eyesight is keen. So if I could welcome our panel of 4 people this morning. We have David Bellamy, who is the Mayor's Chief of Staff. We have Tim Steer, who's Executive Director of Housing and Land at the GLA. We have Sarah Burt, who is Interim... Oh, it's written down here. Here we go. Commercial Finance Director, GLA Land and Property. Is that correct? Does it say interim something on your thing there?
Sorry,
I can't quite
Interim Assistant Director for Land and Development.
Interim Assistant Director for Land and Development. Thank you, and apologies for fluffing that up before we've even really started. And last but not least, Adam Barrett, who is Commercial Finance Director, GLA Land and Property Limited. Good. Well done. And so the GLA Land and Property is the sort of GLA's wholly owned land ownership and development subsidiary set up under the previous mayor, owning large bits of land across London for the purposes of redevelopment and possibly profit. So my first question to you, David, just to kick off. So GLAP is forecast to deliver 68,000 new homes over 25 years. Between 2016 and 2025, only about 29,000 of those have been started and perhaps only 2/3 of those completed, which in turn has led to the well-known problems with the £300 million loan from the GLA to GLAP, effectively as seed funding in 2012-13, not being able to be repaid on time. So it's not gone well, it's not gone to plan. Why is that?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. I think, that's an incredibly broad question, some aspects of which I'd probably respectfully disagree with. But the short answer is, we are a player in what is an incredibly challenging housing market, and I'm sure that through the discussion this morning we will be touching on some of that. What I think it's useful for the committee to understand is that, you say, Chair, we set up in 2012 when the GLA received an amount of land, 635 hectares. If you like me and understand what a hectare is, and in the spirit of the World Cup, it's about the size of, our land holding is about the size of 890 international football pitches. So we can visualise that. And legally, to ensure a level playing field between us and other developers in the private sector, the GLA's land property activities have to be done for a separate company. But we are, to be clear, very much part of the GLA, and other than formal company business, GLAP exists to deliver GLA decisions. And so that's kind of the absolutely kind of key governance point to understand.
So when I suppose this first came to my attention through the audits in December 2023 and then the follow-up audit in December 2024, there seemed to be quite a number of problems, and perhaps chief among them, obviously there was the at that time non-repayment of the £300 million loan, which was supposed to start in 2018. We'll come on to the loan in more detail in a moment. One of the issues seemed to be that there weren't good records kept of that decision to either non or defer payment of those loans. What was the reason why, as you say, what is fundamentally a part of the GLA was making important decisions about large amounts of public money, and it seems to have not been properly documented or recorded?
So, I think it kind of the answer starts from where I finished on the last response, Chair, which is that GLAP, very much part of the GLA, is essentially an accounting and legal structure to implement GLA decisions, and it differs from other GLA activities in that for legal reasons it has to be done for a separate company rather than it just being, you know, a department heading in the budget. And so that really is the difference. And given that, the philosophy around GLAP, you know, when it was established and probably through the 2010s, was, look, right, we're established here, the GLA takes the decisions, yeah, those decisions are to enter into development agreements with commercial partners to develop land. And from those land receipts will flow, and those land receipts will then pay back the debt. And that was the model. And, you know, there was a view that there wasn't the need, other than formal company matters, there wasn't a need for particular governance outside the standard decision-making processes about those agreements. And of course, yeah, all the development agreements were on the land we inherited in 2012 were entered into by 2016. And what I think changed was, frankly, the housing market got a lot more difficult. Yeah, I think looking back, you know, the housing market a decade ago in London, I mean, it probably felt challenging at the time, but, you know, it's like playing a computer game on easy level compared to where we are now, where it's just so incredibly difficult. And so, in response to that, we began a process of bringing in more governance around GLAP, forming a steering group, various other things, various things that I and colleagues asked for to be more transparent than was previously the case. I'm sure all of this stuff we're going to talk about this morning. And yeah, one of the factors there is that this internal relationship between the GLA and GLAP in a finance sense, you know, was obviously what was originally predicated and planned was based on the original view around when we would get repayments from development partners as they delivered the sites that had previously been contracted to them. Yeah. And so obviously as follows, the timing of those payments determines our ability to pay back debt to GLA. And in the particular instance in question, there was a time where the cash flow wasn't as had been originally modelled, and so it was necessary to change the repayment profile. And that was very much handled, should be clear, it was before Adam's time, but it's very much handled within finance by officers because they took the view that this was an internal, essentially accounting matter. And I can see why they thought like that. But, you know, from I think our side, we feel that, you know, we wanted more transparency about that, and, you know, so that's part of the governance changes that have been brought in over the last few years have been to ensure that's the case.
But that GLAP steering group you just mentioned, I mean, that was one of the points that the auditors picked up in 2023, was that there were no terms of reference, minutes of meetings were not being taken showing decisions, decisions contained within the actions are not formally signed off. Those were the actions that the auditors picked up in 2023. So if the purpose of the steering group was to make things a bit more formalised and a bit more structured, not having terms of reference and not having minutes explaining the decision seems like a bit of an oversight.
We were in a process of, like I say, the model that was put in place when GLAP was created and, you know, seemed appropriate through the 2010s when life was more straightforward. That model, you know, we concluded wasn't more appropriate, and we were in a process of improving our governance to do that. The points the auditors made in their audit, which, you know, still gave adequate assurance, it's important to say, were things that we agreed with and were very much things that we were already trying to do. And they were delivered as I would have expected in the months ahead. The auditors came back and looked and gave us substantial assurance. Really, Chair, what you see is a journey we've been on to increase the governance around GLAP, increase the transparency around GLAP, in response to the realisation that we're in a more challenging place than was envisaged when GLAP was set up.
Sorry, just on the timeline then. So when was the steering group set up? What year was that?
2021.
Yeah, 2021 the steering group was first established.
Okay.
And it was initially resourced in a secretariat sense out of Housing and Land.
But you're, forgive me, so 2021 you set up a steering group, and then in 2023, so 2 years later, this is not, a couple of weeks after you were still in the process. The story you've just told us is that this was a new thing and you were in the process of setting it up, but you were 2 years in when the auditors came along and said, you've got no terms of reference for this steering group, and you're not keeping minutes of the meetings of this steering group. And it was only then that you said, oh yeah, we probably should do that, shouldn't we? I mean, I suppose one of the themes that I think might come out this morning is that it seems like this is not going well, and it's one scenario is that it all just was a bit out of sight, out of mind, and the fact that you went 2 years on this steering group, which was set up for the purposes of getting a grip, but there weren't terms of reference for it. The auditors talk about, people weren't necessarily clear what it was for or what they were doing on it, and no minutes kept of the meetings, notes of decisions, but not explanations of why these decisions were kept or what was discussed in the meetings. And you've sort of just given us an explanation that it was a process, it was ongoing, but 2 years is a long time. That's half a mayoral term for no one to realise that this was meeting quarterly, I think, wasn't it? For no one to realise that maybe we should have some terms of reference, maybe we should keep some minutes.
I think firstly, it's very important to say that what is GLAP steering group? Well, it is entirely advisory. The decision-making process around all our land holdings is taken through the GLA's decision-making processes, which are very formal, very clearly documented in mayoral decision-making in the GLA, and have all the proper inputs and documentation. Yeah. Equally, GLAP directors have always taken seriously their responsibility as company directors and things around the running of the company, and we work very closely with our legal colleagues who provide the company secretariat function. Yeah. What we are talking about in terms of GLAP steering group is the forum in which we essentially discuss and provide advice into Housing and Land colleagues and the GLA decision-making, then into the GLA decision-making process. And because of that advisory nature, it wasn't, the focus has evolved through time, and initially was very much on talking about particular schemes and things that we need to talk about, and through doing that, saw the value of what we're doing, and we began the process of formalisation. And that's what you'd see, as you say. We always had records of conclusions we reached. Decision's not necessarily the right word because we're not a decision-making body, and actions, and so that governance was there. And over time we've done more and strengthened that, and indeed, we're a much more active forum now as the challenges in the market have increased, and so now we're a monthly forum, whereas, like you say in the start, it was just quarterly. And so, in response to how the housing market has changed in London, our approach and structures have changed in response to that.
So when you were sitting in those meetings, though, because you're a director of the company, obviously you sort of have two hats, really. You've got you're a GLA officer, also a director of the company. I think you have been since October 2016. Tim, obviously, you're also a director of the company. The Deputy Mayor, Tom Copley, who unfortunately declined to come this morning, perhaps he's doing something else, also a director of the company. So I'm just trying to understand, when the three of you, or whoever the predecessors were in your roles, sitting in those informal steering group meetings, presumably you were also effectively acting as directors of the company.
So we need to be very clear that obviously we're directors of the company all the time, and we carry out our director duties, and we do that through board meetings, which we convene on the basis that we need to, and those are very formally handled with the company secretariat, which is part of TfL Legal. And so absolutely all the right processes are in place around that. Let's say, beyond that, decision making is the responsibility of GLA, not GLAP. We don't, as directors, take decisions to enter an agreement here, sell a piece of land there, or whatever it may be. The GLA takes those decisions, and so the purpose of the steering group is it's not a decision-making body. It is a forum to bring us together as part of the GLA's processes, because we have to recognise that in the state of the market we face, not only is each decision individually important, but also collectively potentially consequential. And so, yes, we're GLAP directors, but we're meeting, and the GLA CFO is in attendance as well, to really try and take a GLA perspective on this, because it's the GLA that takes the decisions, it's the GLA that stands behind the consequences of those decisions, and fundamentally it's the GLA that appoints us as GLAP directors, because we have to have this separate legal body to carry stuff out.
Okay, Assembly Member Hamdash.
Great, thank you. I do have just a technical question. So GLAP inherited 630 hectares of land in 2012. Do you have a sense of how much it still owns and how much has been disposed of? And even if it's just kind of ballpark figure.
I'm happy to take this one. In terms of what has been delivered since 2012, which is when we were first set up as GLA Land and Property, a total of 20,465,000 homes have been completed on our land. Most of those sites are in contract with development partners. They are large brownfield sites which are phased over a significant period of time. As we mentioned, 68,000 homes is the totality of our programme. That's of what has been delivered, as well as what will be delivered over the next 20 plus years. Therefore, we dispose of sites in a periodic fashion as development comes forward. So yes, 635 hectares is the totality of our land. That comprises development land as well as non-developable land. For example, that also includes 100 hectares, which is the Royal Docks outside of City Hall. I don't have the exact number in reference to that 635 in terms of what has already been disposed, but from those statistics you can understand what has been delivered. So that's broadly 39% of our programme relative to what is still to come in terms of development of homes.
I'd appreciate if that could get that figure written down when you do have it to hand. That would be great. Thank you.
Thanks. Assembly Member Clark.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, how does the City Hall Developer Investment Fund fit into GLAP's role in delivering housing and regeneration objectives?
Shall I come in there? The City Hall Developer Investment Fund is based on £324 million, which we've been allocated by government as grant. And it's entirely separate to GLAP, so it's equivalent to our previous land fund, Mayor's Land Fund, where we had some funding available from government and were then able to put that funding out into the market in London. Now, GLAP has an interest in City Hall Developer Investment Fund. Some of the development schemes which are happening on GLAP land are looking for funding for different elements for infrastructure investment or similar. And so GLAP and its development partners have been looking at the potential for City Hall Developer Investment Fund to fund some of that, and have actually been putting bids into the current bidding process for City Hall Developer Investment Fund. And those GLAP-related bids are being assessed alongside all the other bids which have come in, and we'll soon see in the next few weeks which of the GLAP-related schemes have been successful in being allocated funding.
I can also add that GLAP is a vehicle for the GLA's commercial investment to third parties. So there'll also be a role through City Hall Developer Investment Fund where there are commercial investments made to third parties, that those would be transacted through GLAP, serving the function of the GLA.
Okay, moving on to our first substantive section, we've got income model and financial expectations. Assembly Member Hall.
Thank you. Good morning. Can I just ask, going back to that first question, David, I was so surprised when all this came around in 2024, that you were involved in something that hadn't got proper records kept, because you know how highly I think of you, and I was surprised that that was the case. Do you actually think now that there is proper governance of it, GLAP?
So, to be clear, I've always thought there was proper, from a company perspective, I've always thought there was proper governance of GLAP. The question was how best, in this very complicated housing market, to what is the appropriate governance to bring in that is not decision making, because it is not, decision making is carried out by the GLA, not by GLAP, and that's a very unusual situation. And the question was, well, what do we, as a group of officers, GLAP directors, a couple of relevant others, coming together to discuss these issues that ultimately will get put through GLAP books in many cases, but is not a decision-making forum. What is the appropriate level of governance? And it's completely fair to say that our thinking on that has evolved broadly as the housing market has got more challenging. And the decision that was made about loan repayment was absolutely carried out within the GLA's finance regulations, and was done in a proper way. But I think what it did show was that it highlights the challenges that we're facing in terms of the London property market and the impact it has on us, as it does other partners. And so it pointed to us that we needed to get a bit more transparency on what officers had the authority to do, but we wanted to know about it, and so obviously that's something that we addressed.
Okay, so the GLA makes the decisions. Who is responsible within the GLA for making all the decisions?
So under mayoral decision making, the main decisions will go to the mayor. Beyond that, there will be a delegation to Tim as executive director, and in some cases beyond that, there may be delegations to particular senior people in his team.
So who has oversight of that? Because we question people on decisions that are made. We don't seem to be able to question anybody on what happens in GLAP, because it's sort of arm's length.
Well, I mean, I'm going to challenge respectfully the premise of your question, because you have the ability to do it. You're literally doing it now, which is, and I welcome it actually. As with all GLA decisions, they're properly documented, proper process, and when taken, published and available for scrutiny. And as everything else, we have, if you like, under the mayoralty, appropriate processes for oversight of all of this. GLAP steering group is an important part of that, but there are wider delivery mechanisms that look at GLA group housing delivery as part of our programme to build more homes in the city. And so we have governance. Our governance has evolved through the years as we've circumstances change, and so absolutely, of course, we're here to be scrutinised by the Assembly on that.
But clearly it went all those years and wasn't scrutinised properly at all, or it wouldn't have come to light that meetings weren't logged properly, information wasn't there. And when you think about it, the amount of money that you've been lent, or the loans that you have, there should have been greater oversight in the past. So I wouldn't say there was that much more oversight now. So if you were on this side of the table, what would you be asking for better governance and oversight? What would you make as a suggestion?
It's an interesting question. I mean, what I would say also is that, let's say, fundamentally this is about the GLA, and GLAP is the legal vehicle through which its decisions are carried out. And so if you want to look at financial processes and financial risks, then you want to look at that at GLA level. Land and property is clearly an important part of that, because it is inherently a risky and cash-intensive activity. Yeah, the GLA has, chaired by the CFO, its officer level, I'm not involved, a financial risk oversight board, which is there to look at all forms of financial risk. And, I think, obviously, we are in the process, Mayor, Assembly, and recruiting independent members to recruit a audit committee for the authority. And so looking at significant risks is something that I absolutely see that the audit committee will be over. And so I think really the Assembly has, as it has always had ever since 2012, when the GLAP was set up, the ability to hold a session like today. But beyond that, I think the answer is in our creation of the audit committee.
Okay, well, I'm sure we'll come back to it. Thank you. I'm not quite sure you answered it, but I'm sure we'll come to it later. I'll go into the income model and financial expectations. So, Adam, if I can start with you. How dependent is GLAP on continued GLA financial support?
Okay, the current business model is funded from land receipts. So other than passing through loans that the GLA has taken decisions and GLAP acts as the commercial entity that on-lends to other housing organisations, so those are back-to-back transactions. Those are funded by GLA loans, often through the Housing and Land Fund or through future City Hall developer resources. But the operating activities of GLAP itself and its ability to repay the debt that it's borrowed is all funded from land receipts and without GLA direct support.
And so is the current GLAP delivery model financially sustainable over the long term then?
Yes, that's the current forecast. So we forecast out for 20 years in the annual business plan. The business plan is reviewed by the steering group on an annual basis, and we monitor this at steering group on a quarterly basis.
Is that published?
No, this is all part of the steering group papers, and it's because there's a lot of commercially sensitive information in those papers. They're not public documents.
So is it possible that we could ever see them if you redact any of the information? I would hate to think that anybody was hiding behind, it's all sensitive, because clearly there's a hell of a lot of taxpayers' money in this.
So, our attitude around the business plan is that it is overwhelmingly very commercially sensitive, and we are very mindful about the risks around the commercial counterparties that we deal with, and obviously the business plan sets out our approach to those sites, approaches we might be taking in future negotiations with them, issues that we need to be mindful of that we don't necessarily want to draw to their attention. So it's absolutely right that it be a confidential document. We're very happy if the committee wants to try and do something in private session where colleagues can sit down and take you through it, then happy to do that. Beyond that, I know we've provided to your officers some headings and show the format and the nature of what's in there, and so very happy to have private sessions where we can talk in more detail. Okay,
thank you, that's helpful. So Adam, which assumptions in the original business model have proved to be wrong or haven't worked out as planned?
I can't comment on the original business model. That's not information that I've got access to. What I can say is that we look at a range of assumptions when we're preparing the business plan for steering group. We look at that every year. We revise those assumptions based on the current economic environment. And as David said earlier, the current environment is a very challenging one. So if you look at how those assumptions will have changed over the life of GLAP, for a long period up until COVID, we had very, very low interest rates, and that facilitated housing development. We've now got interest rates in the last few years that have increased substantially, and there's been a significant increase in inflationary pressures in the construction industry, and all of these factors are weighing quite heavily on the viability of the housing market, especially in London. So I think the answer is that the viability and the market position has become more challenging over GLAP's life.
Yeah, we keep hearing how challenging it is, but obviously we don't get to see the detail, do we?
If you look at financing rates, for example, it would have been possible for the GLA to borrow at less than 2% in the late 2010s, early 20s. That figure would now be at 5 to 6%, depending on the maturity length of the loans you're entering into.
So are you comfortable with the current position between GLAP and the GLA?
I'm comfortable that the business plan shows that all of GLAP's liabilities can be met. Obviously, the whole of the business plan going forward depends on the future economic position, and that's why we monitor that on a regular basis and take account of any changes.
So what are the financial expectations for GLAP for 26-27, and how is it currently performing? I'm just hearing doom and gloom here, but how is it performing at the moment?
The forecast for the next 5 years are that GLAP will be making surpluses, and it will be able to meet its loan repayment obligations. All of that is predicated on the land receipts that we have in the business plan being delivered, and there'll be a mixture of schemes and development agreements that determine the obligations of developers in terms of repaying those receipts. But the whole business plan is viable for the next 5 years, and it's one of the tests that we have to meet with our auditors on an annual basis to demonstrate that the organisation can operate as a going concern.
So is there any reason it has to exist really long term? What does it do that the GLA can't do?
So I think the reason it has to exist is because legally there are things that the GLA is only allowed to do through a company for taxation reasons. Yeah. So you could take a view. The GLA has GLAP has these land holdings. Right. We essentially sell them off, get them developed, get the receipts, job done, closed down. Yeah. And that would be a possible path. But what that leaves is probably two questions for the GLA to answer. One, does it want to be involved in other land holdings and help, take ownership, perhaps of, taking land from others in the public sector? I'm thinking about OPDC, as I say this, in the way they do there, and, bringing forward schemes where, the public sector has advantages in doing that the private sector does not. Secondly, the point Sarah was making, that there are certain commercial transactions the GLA wants to make to support private housing delivery, and legally those have to be done through a company. So again, it's absolutely the GLA's business, but it passes through GLAP in order that we have the appropriate legal and taxation treatment. And so, to give the Mayor the ability to do things like that in future, I'd submit you're always going to want a company to do it. Okay,
and the Mayor's quite happy with the way it's going, is he, at the moment?
The Mayor is, as ever, keen that we, and I'm sure he and all members of the Assembly are in as one on this, keen that we deliver as much as we can, particularly housing and affordable housing, as quickly as we can. But equally, he does, as I'm sure the Assembly will, recognise the real challenges in the market at the moment, and that's why obviously, at the level of these schemes, there's a lot of work going on with partners to try and keep them moving, and why also the broader GLA level, there's a lot of engagement with the government to try and get more support in order to help the housing market, and we're obviously a part of that.
Okay. Shall I go on to the next section, Chair?
No, actually, we've got, before we get there, Assembly Member Hamdash had a supplementary on this section.
Great, thank you. So we've heard about how the financial model is based on land disposal. But the mayor announced that his new City Hall developer was going to be taking a Singapore-style approach to housing. Now, one of the famous parts of Singapore housing development is that the land isn't sold off, and actually that tenants buy 99-year leases on that property. Is the mayor telling us this fundamental financial model is going to be changing going forward?
I think, historically we have worked in this land disposal model, and that's worked for the developments which GLAP's seen to date. We've done some work in terms of entering into a JV at Barking Riverside, which is more in terms of that staying in model, where the GLA's got equity, and we've then recently invested in Silvertown Quays in a similar way, where we've used around 100 million of GLA funds to invest in that joint venture, which will now be in for the next couple of decades. And I think there are advantages of us doing more of that where we can. We know that the private sector, for the reasons that David's talked about in terms of the wider housing market and the difficulties around housing delivery, they are looking for help from the public sector, particularly around risk sharing where that's appropriate, and this is what that kind of model offers. But it very much depends on the resources we've got available to do that. And Silvertown, Barking Riverside before it, and then Silvertown were big investments. They've been possible because there have been some funds to do it. We're not in that position to do another one of those big investments at the moment, but as David says, we continue to talk to government around the resources available to us, and if we're able to attract some more funding, then we would look to do more of that where we can. There may be some opportunities for some smaller equity investments via City Hall Developer Investment Fund too, but we're just assessing the bids that have come in on that now.
Thank you. So just to be clear, in the Royal Docks development, are you going to be selling off the land, or are you taking a new approach here?
For Silvertown, well, I mean, no, we are. The GLAP's got the GLA's got an interesting double role here in a way, because GLAP is disposing of the land over time to the joint venture, which the GLA has just invested into. So, in some ways, the GLAP is transferring. David, do you want to come in?
Yes, look, very directly on your question. Yeah, the development agreement on Silvertown Quays dates back to, I think, 2013. Yeah. And so fundamentally that model of what happens there was set under the previous mayor as it happens. To your general point, it's absolutely possible if we have a piece of land without a development agreement, we have a choice, and fundamentally the choice is what that land is used for. Clearly, if a portion of the land is being used for private sale, then you can only do that if you sell off the land, because ultimately the person who lives there, owns the home, needs to own their land. If you say, on the other hand, no, we're going to do a build to rent type product, then you don't necessarily, you can sell the land to somebody else who's going to do that product, or you in principle have the option of saying, well, we'll get somebody to build it for us, but we'll own it and we'll collect the rent. So absolutely you have that choice in principle, but as we've said, for the land we inherited, development agreements were put in place by 2016 under the previous mayor, and so for there, the path is set.
I think what I'm struggling with is if there's not a fundamental change in land ownership, what makes this Singapore style? Surely it's exactly the same as what we've been doing for a very long time.
I think we're probably at danger of straying into a housing committee and getting out of GLAP, but I think the fundamental point is it's about the level of activism, and the GLA's decision. And as Tim said, it's not through GLAP, it's through a separate company, because we're the landowners, so we need to keep separately because we've got the relationship with the joint venture partnership that is developing the site, and then the GLA is part of that joint venture, and so GLAP need to keep a bit separate. That is a big, significant step for the GLA and something that it hasn't done before. And, the Mayor was acknowledging that, and I think speaking to a direction of travel where he sees that we're going to need to be able to do more of that in future. Now, our ability to do it depends very much on financial resources, as Tim said. It also depends on availability of land. So we're working with the Cabinet Office at the moment. Again, sorry, Chair, I'm straying outside GLAP, but I probably need to answer the question. We're working with the Cabinet Office to set up a London Land Board, which is designed to bring together public sector partners to look at their land holdings and ensure where, what is the best use of those for the area, and ensure that if they're not needed for their current purpose, well, how can we decide what they should be used for in the most sensible way and bring the right skills and experience to bear on taking those sites forward. So, absolutely, I think what the Mayor's saying is there's a lot more of this to come, but, clearly we are, with the land holdings that GLAP has, we start from the position of the development agreements that we inherited.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if you'd finished. Yeah, that sounds like maybe it was more of a sound bite than an actual plan. Assemblymember Georgiou.
Just two things, David. Fundamentally, I don't agree with your premise that because someone buys a lease on a site, they need to own the freehold on that site. That's fundamentally not true. And I hate leasehold, by the way, for what it's worth, but that's number one, that's not correct. Number two, just what a bureaucratic answer. What do we need a land board for? Can't someone in your team just go through land registry, check who owns the land, reach out to them and say, this is what we've got to do? What we've got to set, this country is just packed with boards and committees and just rubbish. Just get on with it. Just go through the list. Who owns the site? Guess what? Tim over there, pick up the phone. Hello, you own this site. Can we work with you to build on it? Why do we need another layer of bureaucracy?
Okay, so on your 2 points, firstly, the point is, we tend to sell, and Sarah or Tim may want to say more in detail, but we tend to sell long lease. So, we keep the freehold. On your second point, absolutely, I would expect that Tim's team have, working with borough colleagues, have a good understanding of where there is vacant brownfield land, and that is all, it pulls together into the London plan process, for instance. I'm talking about something different. I'm talking about engaging with public bodies and saying, well, right, have you got land where, the use of that is coming to an end? Holloway Prison might be, looking back, might be an example of that, and ensuring that then, there may be land just down the road that a different public body owns, and we may be able to, in technical speak, get some marriage value and actually create something that really works for the local area by having that engagement and by ensuring that the right skills are brought to bear on its development. And so that's what we'll be trying to achieve, and it's very focused on that. It's not about kind of the broader brownfield land in London, which is already covered, and we don't need more process on.
I can add to the leasehold point. So GLAP has a property asset strategy. That's a public document published in December 2023. That highlights how we typically transact. So we do retain the freehold in most cases, particularly where we've got strategic land assets and big regeneration projects happening over a long period of time. And we have moved to increase the lease length, the long leasehold interests, directly in response to the Mayor acting for leaseholders and ensuring that we can grant longer certainty in terms of those leasehold interests. Of course, we're currently reviewing that position in light of reforms in terms of leasehold reform and move to common hold. But I'd refer you to the property asset strategy, which expands on that in a bit more detail.
Yeah, if it helps, my question relates to effectively, because David, I mean, with all due respect, you didn't really answer Assemblymember Hamdash's question. That's the only reason why I raised it, and you alluded to the point. Look, I don't care whether you keep the land or not, keep the freeholds, whatever. It's none of my business. As long as it gets built, I find the rest of this irrelevant. It's just rectifying that point that you said, that in your words were, because people want to own their homes, we would therefore have to sell the land. Well, that's just factually incorrect. You sell the property with long leases, which we all encourage, because otherwise you can't get a mortgage on it, or at least a decent one. But fundamentally, as with many of our council estates and right to buy, people have long leases, but we own the freehold on the estates. Same principle. But anyway, I'll leave it there, Chair. It was just on that point.
Okay, we are now moving on to our next section on the loan repayments. Assemblymember Hall.
Thank you. This is to you, Adam. What is the current expectation for repayment of the £300 million loan, and what does the slower than anticipated repayment tell us about GLAP planned redevelopment?
The current the repayment schedules of the £300 million loan is that they'll be repaid by 2031, March 2031. Currently, there's £215 million outstanding as at the 31st of March balance sheet date, so £85 million of that debt has already been repaid.
Okay. What are the main reasons that after more than a decade, the loan from the GLA remains above the original amount borrowed?
I think the original amount was 300 million. The current amount is 215 million.
Okay. Well, then our research is...
I think, if I can be helpful, what's probably happening there is that, so we've got the original 300 million, and Adam described how we're paying that back. As Sarah has already said, completely separately, the GLA is routing some things through GLAP, and essentially, we take the debt from GLA and immediately lend out to the person the GLA is contracting with, and that's, it's a back-to-back arrangement. So it's something that in our internal accounting we try and show a little differently because it's entirely separate. It's not kind of GLAP debt. It's just it's a GLA activity that has to be routed through a private company for legal reasons, and it's just concluded that we concluded it's better to put it through GLAP than go to the expense of setting up another company just to do this.
So, David, what is the total amount of money the GLA currently has loaned with the Mayor's various different development arms?
Well, that's a much broader question than GLAP, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, thinking aloud, the GLA lends money to LLDC, to OPDC, and to OSDC. And so obviously we have the annual budget process, the committee has all those figures. We don't have, unless Tim can think of anything that I'm missing, any loans from the GLA to places for London on the TfL side. So really it's GLAP plus the three development corporations. Do
you know a ballpark amount, because that must be pretty hefty? Have you any idea, very ballpark?
So the big one is LLDC, where the loans are currently about £500 million, the majority of which, given that we're here talking largely about housing, it's important to say is not about housing, but was about the cost of rebuilding the stadium following the Olympics to turn it into a venue that could be used for football outside the summer athletics season. And that's the vast majority of that cost. OPDC and OSDC, I'm reluctant because I'm doing this off the top of my head, but from memory, we're in the region of about 150 million for each of them, I think. And that's the, in OPDC, that's very much about the land acquisition as we pull together the land in order that then the comprehensive redevelopment of the area can proceed, and that's a very conscious strategy to de-risk that project and make it attractive to the private sector, which is why when we have the tender process for the master developer underway at the moment. And then Oxford Street, I think this committee talked about in March, so it's probably familiar there.
The GLAP loans that have been passed on to third-party developers are 212 million at the end of March 26. So that is additional to the core loan funding that was originally taken on as part of the setup of GLAP. So the assets and loans of the legacy organisations were passed over to the GLA.
Okay. I mean, in March 21, the borrowings from the GLA on GLAP stood at 583 million, and then it reduced to 370 million in March 2025. So what drove that reduction? Because that's quite a substantial reduction.
There will be loans that are being repaid by organisations that GLAP has on lent to. If I look at the loan schedules in March 25, we repaid 23 million. The refinancing that you referred to earlier that took place in 23, those loans were repaid in March 25. So that's 46 million pounds of that.
Yeah, so we, to your March 25 point, we got ahead of schedule on repaying back the 300 million pound loan, and then you just have these separate commercial transactions which are, say, are routed through our books. I appreciate those two separate things going through make the headline figures a little hard to follow.
Okay, there's a couple of written questions, if we could put them into you to ask, because there's so many different figures flying around here. I mean, one of the official questions is what has been the impact of the late repayment of the GLA and GLAP so far, and what would be the financial and operational impact on both organisations if these delays continue?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's right to say, as the chair did, that we refinanced the loan because of the way the cash flow was running. We then paid that loan ahead of schedule on the refinance, so we were ahead of the game, and the remaining debt taken out a while ago is at a low interest rate, and so from a GLA Treasury Management perspective, this is not something that will cause them any particular concern, because it is such a low interest rate, and so we absolutely intend to repay according to our plan, as Adam said, but it's not, and obviously GLAP bears the interest costs and pays those to the GLA, but because it's so low interest rate, it's not a major factor in our finances.
Except because refinancing isn't, if you just refinance and borrow more or whatever, it leads to a very confused picture, I think you'll agree.
Yeah, and obviously that's why we paid back the refinancing, as I say, ahead of schedule.
Yeah, and this is why I think some of us would prefer better oversight of this. I'll hand back to you, Chair.
Okay. Assembly Member Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, panel. I just wanted to ask you, because my background before I came to City Hall was working in housing associations, and so I'm aware that they quite frequently refinance all their, like I can see Adam is nodding already. I mean, would you say that what you've done here is at all unusual? Or would you say that this is fairly common market practice to refinance loans, and particularly if you're able to refinance at a lower interest rate?
If you're using the housing association example, then yes, they will look at the market conditions. They will look at the size of their development programme and their needs. And if there are opportunities in the market to refinance their loan portfolio to gain long-term benefit for the business plan, then they will do so. A lot of the housing association lending will be with private banks rather than Public Works names board, so there's a lot more negotiation as part of that approach. For the GLA, the arrangement's often more simple because most of the borrowing is through the Public Works loans board, but the principle of refinancing is still there. The GLA will look to run a treasury strategy that maximises the benefit.
Sure. I mean, I think the point that I was making is not whether or not we're going to the city or whether you're going to the PWLB, and obviously PWLB is probably going to be at a lower rate than anything that you could get from city lenders. But it was more the principle of refinancing and whether there's anything financially unusual about this process, or whether it's just something that, I mean, housing associations tend to be the social housing developer as of this, well, since the 1989 Housing Act, they've sort of taken over from local authorities or indeed us or anyone else in London. So I just wanted you to confirm that this is not an unusual,
practice,
completely normal practice.
Should be doing to maximise the financial.
Is there anything unusual that you've done in terms of the financial practices here?
I think refinancing is absolutely normal to deal with the financial circumstances of an organisation. The issue where it does become more concerning is if you fundamentally can't afford to repay loans, and that's going to be a long-term problem, then obviously that is of concern.
Okay, but in our papers, I think I've seen that there's an audit report that says GLAP is on a going concern basis. Okay, thank you, Chair.
So regarding the point about it being a concern that you can't repay loans, so the original loan schedule, the 2012-13 loan schedule, had repayments starting in 2018. You weren't able to start repayments in 2018.
I'm not sure about the exact position in 2018, but looking at...
I'm certain about it because I checked the original mayoral decision. The repayments were supposed to start in 2018.
How GLAP's finances work as an organisation, its main income sources are land sales. Those can vary significantly over periods depending on how development schemes progress.
Yes.
So I don't think that the fact that the GLA rescheduled those loans to match the cash flows is a source of concern, as long as the long-term cash flows demonstrate that the loans can be repaid, which they do.
I suppose what I'm pushing back on, very gently but firmly, is this idea that it's all fine. You did say that it becomes an issue if you can't repay. The original schedule of repayments on the original, that £300 million loan under the previous administration, the loan repayments were supposed to start in 2018. I'm certain of that because I checked the original mayoral decision. By this point, of that 300 million, 240 million was supposed to have been repaid. And in fact, not only did GLAP not commence repayments in 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, no repayments were made. My understanding is that the first repayments on that loan were not made until 2024, or possibly very late in 2023. So that's 5 years on from the point at which GLAP was supposed to start making repayments on that loan. No repayments have been made. And that matches your scenario where cash flow was not able to meet the loan repayments. You said that would be a concern, and then for 5 years, that's what was happening.
I think to clarify the concern is if the organisation cannot at any point repay that debt. The land assets were still with GLAP, and the cash flows were. This is a timing issue matter rather than an ability to repay matter. So the rescheduling was rescheduling the debt in order for the cash flows generated by GLAP to be there to repay that debt. It wasn't about a question of GLAP not being able to repay the debt at all.
We're going to come on to housing delivery in a moment, but you were saying earlier, you were talking about how benign the circumstances were in the late 2010s and up to the pandemic. So this period, when the current administration began in 2016, you've got half a decade of, what you correctly described as benign circumstances. It was sort of the boom time for development in London. Interest rates were very low. Everything was going up. There were tower cranes across the city. And yet during that period, GLAP was not able to make the repayments. And the reason is not because it was insolvent, but because it was not building to the schedule that it was supposed to. So why... We'll come on to building but in a moment, but I just want to be clear that is what happened while we're on the loan. That's why the loan repayments were not able to be made for 5 years.
I think it's fair to say that conditions in the housing market in the late 2010s were, and what I was trying to say earlier, was much easier than they are now. And looking back, it looks like we were playing on easy mode. That doesn't mean to say that it was easy at the time. Now, obviously...
But we're not. Yeah, but David, we're not talking about years.
I'm trying to get to a point of agreeing with you. Okay. Obviously, the housing delivery and the land repayment from developers has not been what was assumed back in 2012. Yeah. Now, I'm not able to join the debate because I wasn't here. I don't have the detail. about, well, actually, was that just because that plan was hopelessly wrong, or it was a good plan and there have been issues in delivery? It may actually be more likely that no plan is perfect, but external things have happened that couldn't possibly have been foreseen when that plan was created. What we can say is that our net assets, if you look at GLAP, have gone up from when we formed in 2012, 115 million. They're now about 251 million. And so, in that sense, we've overall really moved forward and are in a strong position. But I agree with you. The fundamental story here is not about internal accounting arrangements within the GLA, between GLA and GLAP. The fundamental story is about a model which is about making repayments from development agreements previously entered into. And so it's one about delivery and where those agreements have worked well and where they've worked less well.
Yes, I mean, I would say that the purpose of GLAP is not to have impressive asset value, it's to deliver homes for Londoners to live in, which brings us perfectly onto the next section, which is about housing delivery. Assembly Member Georgiou.
Thank you, Chair. Tim and David, I'd appreciate briefer responses, as comprehensive as you want to be, but let's not drag this out. Given current delivery rates, are you satisfied that GLAP, sorry, this to you, Tim. Given current delivery rates, are you satisfied that GLAP is doing enough to support the Mayor's housing ambitions and responding to London's housing pressures?
I think, it's hard to be satisfied because we know what London's housing need is, and we know what we'd love to be doing more with GLAP to contribute to that, but what I do know is that we work incredibly hard every day to maximise the housing outputs from GLAP, and as we've all been saying, the conditions are incredibly difficult. I used the word challenging when we last spoke in the Oversight Committee. That's very much the case for GLAP and its partners as it is for the wider housing market, and our job, I think, is to maximise what's available, and that's what we seek to do.
Right, so your 20,000 caveats aside, along with David's, you're saying that probably you're not happy with where we are, you hope it'd be better. Is that a fair assessment?
We try and do as much, absolutely.
That wasn't the question that I asked. Are you broadly happy or not happy? I'll put it in a more simple way. I can't put any more straightforward than that. 0 to 10, 0 being not very happy, 10 being extremely happy. Pick one. Pick your metric.
In terms of the efforts that we're going to try.
Here we go again. Right, are you satisfied or not satisfied?
I'm not satisfied.
Right, there we go. That was it. Thank you. That's fine. Thank you. No, and I've noted the caveats, and I'm not disputing them. We're in a challenging situation. I just wanted to assess your current view.
We want to be ambitious to do more.
Right. I know we're all ambitious, aren't we? Tim, what explains the reduced growth in cumulative housing starts over the last few years? So I note that the current housing conditions are not great. I think we've all understood that assessment, but cumulative over recent years.
I think that is the answer. The cumulative housing starts are made up of starts across a series of different projects that we have. All of those projects are facing challenges. All of those projects, we're working incredibly hard with the partners to ensure that they're bringing homes forward as quickly as possible. But like all housing development in London, it's difficult, and that's what affects the numbers of starts at the end of the day.
Thank you. And David, I appreciate that you've covered a lot of this with previous responses to Assembly members. So in terms of the Mayor personally holding GLAP to account for the current struggle in meeting its milestones and delivery, what's his involvement been, other than you obviously taking quite an important role on this?
Well, yeah, the fundamental role of the Mayor is to be, as with the whole range of things the Mayor deals with, is about being satisfied that we have appropriate structures in place to address and deliver what the Mayor wants to deliver, and for him to then, get involved where he personally can make that difference. And that's why, because, as we say, GLAP absolutely and GLA absolutely not immune to the wider pressures facing the market. In fact, actually, they're probably worse for us because of the infrastructure needs on our big brownfield sites, which have far more expensive and complicated to build on than many other sites across London. And that's why, for instance, the Mayor's worked with the Secretary of State on the package of emergency measures, because that's something that, will have limited impact for GLAP, where we're already in development agreements.
So why are you talking about it? The question I asked you was the Mayor's involvement in GLAP. Now, we've all noted, and I'm sure Housing Committee has noted, the Secretary of State's intervention on the reduction on affordable housing and the targets there. I've asked you about his personal involvement in GLAP. You've given me an example of where the response has been limited. So just rather than broad stroke, Sadiq Khan loves GLAP and he sent me after them to deal with it, it's very simple. What's he personally been involved with on this project? If it's not much, that's okay. It's not a criticism. That's what he has officers like you for. But what's he done?
So his involvement would be where we need to escalate things to a mayoral level in order to get things unblocked. So one very practical example would be during the extensive, would be a polite word, negotiations surrounding the Silvertown Quays transaction, where he engaged directly with the Secretary of State in order to help get that unblocked successfully. So that would be an example. And so, the Mayor, at a personal level, supports and helps us with things, and more broadly will obviously, as he meets partners going around London, support relationships in that sense.
Good. Thank you for that response. Tim, when do you anticipate that the full 68,000 homes will be delivered, and what will be the average level of starts per year that will be required to achieve this?
Sarah might want to just come in on the detail of the profile.
Through the Building More Homes delivery plan, which the Mayor signs off, he does set targets to GLAP per year. So last year, for example, we had a target of 1,000 homes. We did exceed that. So I think from that perspective, we can say we've done well. We achieved 1,139 starts at 40% affordable housing. Over the course of the next few financial years, we have further targets. So we've got 1,500 homes to start this financial year and next. So those are clear targets in the public domain, which we are reporting against in our annual report. Of course, then there's there's a bigger total that needs to be delivered, and that has to be forecast out. That very much depends on market challenges, and so the further ahead we have, that the harder it is to forecast. So, for example, that the biggest sites we have with development left to come forward is the Greenwich Peninsula, also Barking Riverside with Silvertown. Therefore, we're spanning that out for the next 20 years.
So congratulations on both you and completely avoiding my question, because I appreciate that the Mayor sets targets, doesn't be delivered. What my question was, what are the forecasts for how many need to be delivered every year to actually meet the 68,000 homes target, and when will that target be met?
I mean, I think we know that it's going to take about 2 decades to get to those kind of numbers. We can't accurately forecast for that distance into the future.
All right, well, you give me 2 decades. That's okay, fine, because by my numbers, based on 24-25 start figures, it would take GLAP over 100 years from now to deliver its planned start expectations, if we're taking full year 24-25.
If you look at our forecast, so I mentioned 1,500 homes for the next couple of financial years, then for 2028 to 2029 beyond, we've got just short of 32,000 homes. Of course, the starts average over the past 10 years has been just short of 2,000. So it does ebb and flow based on the market. So you could you could look at that as your average and what's left to go.
Okay, thank you. Now, I did have a question about major developers pulling out of projects across London, in particular Berkeley and Taylor Wimpey. Now, obviously, they're two of the biggest developers in London and in the market. Now, once again, we've heard about the whole challenging market situation. I don't think anybody's denying that. But the Mayor has been in office for 10 years. GLAP has been on his books for 10 years. And so we've had, and I know this has sort of gone through with Assembly Member Garrett. So 24,000, I think, am I right in saying have been built so far? 24,000? Yeah?
Are they starts or finishes?
Yeah.
starts or completions, we have, in terms of what's been delivered,
Yeah.
Thank you, Tim. In terms of what's been completed since 2012, it's 20,465 homes. And then in terms of what has started, it's 26,469 homes.
Okay, so all of that goes back to 2012. The mayor's been in office for 10 years. And so I asked myself the question, well, I guess I'll ask you since you're here. When will we stop getting excuses? Because as I say, you know, the mayor is going to destroy the green belt along with the idiots that lead particular London boroughs. The government is having to reduce its affordability on private and public land. We know we have a housing crisis in this city. So therefore, perhaps, David, this might be a bit more appropriate for you. The 68,000 is nearly, well, 20,000 off, but nearly the amount that London is going to be forced to build by this new Labour government, 88,000 a year. I mean, is it not frustrating for you that we're sitting on this land? You know, you can blame the previous mayor as well, including this one, your own boss. Are you not frustrated that we've pretty much lost over, where are we, 14 years? Nearly just over a whole decade of development that could have met a year's target.
So we all want to deliver as much good housing as we can, as quickly as we can. I think we have to recognise that all these sites are under development agreements. Now, to your point, and to be perfectly fair, the current mayor inherited all those agreements. The previous mayor inherited some of them as well. So if you take, for instance, Greenwich Peninsula, which has a huge space on it, that agreement was formed long before it was passed. The land was passed over to the GLA, and does not have any of the controls on delivery and pace of delivery that we would expect and require in anything that we were contracting now. And we have to work with that. And if you want to get more into specifics of that site, I'm sure Sarah can say more. But we have looked for opportunities to try and enable other people to come in and take some of those sites forward, where our delivery partner is prepared to support that to make things happen. But we have to operate within the contractual arrangements that we inherited, and some of them are absolutely not as we would want them to be.
Look, that's fine. I'll leave it there. I think, David, what would be helpful for the committee when looking at these contractual arrangements, because I'm not doubting your word, because I know that with some of these land deals, over successive mayors are not perfect, let's say, and probably unhelpful when it comes to securing loans or paying back loans or securing particular planning permissions that fall within the scope of other London boroughs. I appreciate all that, but what would be helpful from our perspective, because I know that GLAP is a particular pet project of the chair, is actually if we could, number one, obviously I appreciate there's commercial sensitivities, but just redacted where appropriate, but also where you see the particular restrictions in these land contracts and development contracts moving forward. But that would be helpful, I think, for the sake of the committee.
Sure, I've already said, very happy to have some private discussion where officers can take you through some key sites and challenges, etc. Absolutely
Great.
Fine.
Thank you, David. Thank you to all of you. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Just before we move on, I'd like to say hello to, we have a school visit from Year 5 staff and students from George Tomlinson Primary School in Leytonstone. Is that right? Welcome. We are discussing land that the London Mayor owns for building homes on. Sorry, just quickly, Sarah, you mentioned targets that the Mayor sets. I don't think we managed to find those. So if you could send us where those are published and how far out ahead they are published, that would be very handy.
Yes, they're contained within the Building More Homes delivery plan, so signed off by the Mayoral Delivery Board. But we can share those subsequently or refer the relevant parts within it.
Okay, great. Assemblymember Bahari.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I really want to talk about some honesty that's needed for London. We've just heard about the targets and the challenges, but let's really be honest about the 68,000 figure, David. We've seen starts fallen from 2,364 to 622 to 382. I mean, if we're going to continue this trend, it's going to be 150, perhaps, if we're lucky, to get the number of starts. So really, let's be honest here. Are you still going to be saying that 68,000 figure is still a realistic delivery target, or will you just say, no, it's not?
Yes, and, you know, like, we need to be careful not to selectively quote figures. 25-26, to continue a series, the starts was 1,139. Yeah. In 16-17, the starts was 766. The following year, it was 3,653. It is the nature of property development, particularly where you're dealing with, in the scheme of things, a small number of large sites that are phased, that the numbers will oscillate. So, yeah, the number of starts will oscillate, the number of completions will oscillate, the payment profile into GLAP's accounts, and thus our profit or sometimes loss figure will oscillate based on that. That is how property development works. And, you know, as has been said, we have agreements in place. We work very closely with partners where the current incredibly difficult climate impacts that, and so we're absolutely still committed to delivering that, and delivering that just like with the example I gave of Greenwich Peninsula, and indeed what's happened at Silvertown Quays, another example of trying to ensure things happen and ensure they happen as quickly as we can.
Well, let's tie in that honesty with the transparency that's needed. So, Tim, do you think that GLAP can publish the scheme level milestones so that the Assembly can see what sites are on track, what sites are not on track? Because that's what we really want to see. We want to see honesty and we want to see transparency. And I want to make sure that those schemes are published publicly so that we could all see it. The whole of London should have access to this.
Yeah, I mean, we have talked about the commercial sensitivities, and they are really real. You can very easily imagine a scenario where if there are specific scheme milestones and targets set, then we can be held to ransom by, commercial partners in negotiations, and so it's really difficult. But as David said, we can very much talk you through the schemes in a private briefing session, but it's hard to do that in public, as you're suggesting.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there, but let's just push for this honesty and transparency, because I don't think London trusts the figures.
If I could just add to that, we in the last 2 consecutive financial years, we have published an annual report for GLAP, and within that we give the overall targets, but we also provide more granular detail in terms of our key strategic development sites, what has been delivered, what is remaining to be delivered. So it's very clear where those homes are going to be coming forward, but also our strategy. So given a bit more high level in terms of, well, what is the future strategy for these key strategic areas? What are we going to be doing over the next couple of years to support that? As well as then that is expanded upon within our accounts. So we do as much as we can, and we are seeking to improve our transparency. We recognise that, and that's where we elaborate upon that within our annual report.
Yeah, and obviously with that property asset strategy, etc., we've taken the decision to publish these documents ourselves because we want to be as transparent as we can be, and if there are things that we can do more of whilst respecting the commercial realities, we will. But something about, I just want to be very clear that we need to be very careful before we say things that impugn the integrity of officers. You absolutely can have faith in these figures, and it is not acceptable to me to suggest otherwise and imply that officers are in some way behaving dishonestly.
Assembly Member Hamdash.
Great, thank you. Where am I? Quick question from me. We're on question 6, sorry.
No, it's 4.
Oh, there you go, sorry. The temperature's clearly getting to me. So given how the housing crisis has intensified in the last 15 years, it concerns me that the function of GLAP is to trade in a speculative land market. Do you think this is still a sustainable way to manage public land in the interests of Londoners?
So I don't think our interest is to trade in a speculative land market. Our interest is in taking lands that the public sector has and getting it developed for the benefit of Londoners, and that's what we're here to do. as I think we've said, in response to Assembly Member Hall's questions, in the future, if we had resources and were able to bring in more land and do more, we would be up for doing that. But it's not about trading in a speculative land market. It's about trying to make best use of the land to deliver homes. And I probably should say it's not just all about homes either, because we have industrial land holdings as well. And we have things that we do for social purposes that we may want to come on and talk about. But it's not about speculative land trading. That's not what we're here to do at all.
I'll just endorse that ambition for a future that looks different. I really remember when I was talking to the mayor about that model that Vienna has embraced, where a lot of land is in public ownership. It does strike me that does need a fundamental kind of reimagining of how we're operating right now. I'll pass back.
Looking at some of the particular schemes, I think we've perhaps drilled into what are the factors, like the difficulties of brownfield land and requirement for infrastructure, in addition to all the problems that everybody has everywhere else. Just thinking about some schemes in particular. Obviously, the two big ones are the Greenwich Peninsula, where, let me look at the numbers here. So yeah, 17,500 there should be, and it's about 3,500 started so far. And then you've got, obviously, Barking Riverside is the other big one. I think nearly 20,000, of which only just over 3,000 have started. Obviously, when we look at how far behind GLAP is, those are, that's where the bulk of that laggardly build-out is happening. What are the particular issues there? And is there really anything at all that could be done on either of those sites to accelerate the rate of build-out?
I can take, first of all, Greenwich Peninsula, which you refer, and then happy to go on to Barking Riverside afterwards. Yes, you're right that the master plan, which was consented in 2022, so we increased the density, but that increased up to just short of 17,500 homes, so it is significant. It was first that deal was first entered into by English Partnerships in 2002, so it is very historic. We did inherit that from government, so that's an important point to make.
Sorry to interrupt then. So that's 3,000 delivered out of 17,500 over 24 years. Then that goes back to 2002.
That's when the contract was first entered into by government.
Well, I mean, that's when the stopwatch starts, isn't it? I appreciate there's always a lead-in time and setup and so on, but because I'm sure if Tom Copley here, he would do his famous hockey stick thing, but I reckon 2 decades is long enough for the hockey stick to ramp up a bit. This is not a dig at the mayor. Obviously, he wasn't there in 2002.
No, of course I can explain what we've sought to do to increase the pace of delivery.
But I'm correct there. That's just over 3,000 since the clock started in 2002 on Greenwich. That's a long old time.
Yeah, and it's also worth saying that the people who then the government entered into that agreement with back then are no longer on the scene and changed in 2013. And so that, for whatever reason, they decided, obviously long before my time, they decided that they weren't willing or able to take it forward. And then, it moved across to Night Dragon. And to some extent, Sarah, you'll cover this, but it all it resets the activities on the project, which is the problem, isn't it?
Definitely. So Night Dragon came on board in 2013, and there have been subsequent master plans, the 2015 master plan, which increased the number of homes. Then subsequently, I spoke about the 2022 consent. So that was positive because it increased the amount of affordable housing, and it also looked at a new affordable housing, a new delivery strategy, because key is one developer can only do so much. Therefore, the strategy has been working with Night Dragon to increase the number of developers who do come onto the site so that you can have a number of parties bringing plots forward. L&Q came on board and they are just completing just short of 500 homes, 60% affordable on the peninsula, very high quality. They were shortlisted for the best mixed-use development in London, so really, really high quality, particularly in light of the high level of affordable. So that has been undertaken, and we're looking at bringing forward the further plots for 50% affordable housing in that neighbourhood. We have also recently varied that contract dating back to 2002 to modernise it and that includes having the ability to support forward funding deals. So again, that makes the site more attractive to investors and does enable then other developers to come on board. Therefore, the key motivation for us, and if you look back through the mayoral decisions, which are all public, the key objective has been increasing the pace of development, because there is a recognition that we want that to be at a higher rate. And we're working very closely with Night Dragon. There are a number of schemes on site, including in the context of a very challenging market, I have to say. They have led and drawn down land, and that is reflecting in our numbers. So 300 homes are on site now, build to rent, within the Lower Riverside neighbourhood. They're on site for a further 866 homes, where there's significant enabling works over the Blackwall Tunnel. So it's important to highlight that there is significant infrastructure works and utilities and things happening below the ground, as well as on top, and a lot of infrastructure that needs to be delivered, which adds to the complexity and also leads to some of the planning challenges as well, because of the master plan, the significant scale of the sites coming forward.
I suppose none of that really inspires confidence, because not to labour the point, but obviously we had the period sort of 3 to 10 years ago where things were much easier into getting all these things done, and we didn't get a lot done there, the royal we, and obviously the situation we're in now is much more difficult. And if this was difficult to bring forward then, I just have a horrible sinking feeling that whoever is sitting here in 10 years' time is probably looking at a number that's not much bigger. I mean, maybe, I don't know, 5,000 in total rather than 3,000. But it just feels like the whole site is just, limping along. I can't quite. I'm not hearing anything, I suppose, that makes me think that over the next decade, it's really going to crack on, and there's going to be loads of new housing going up in Greenwich Peninsula.
I dispute that in looking at what we're delivering with L&Q, what's currently on site, but also then what we're looking forward to deliver over the next couple of years, and finding partners. We're working very closely with Greenwich Council as well about their ability to come on and be have social rented homes on the peninsula, not only within the Night Dragon master plan, but also south of that at Greenwich Millennium Village, where they already have homes, and we're talking about a pipeline of more.
So I've suggested 2,000 over the next 10 years, and you said you dispute that. What's more realistic then?
Over the next 10 years, I don't have the figures in. Just on Greenwich and just on the peninsula. We are looking in terms of the forecast of a plot coming forward at least every other year, and each plot contains about 500 homes. So we're working with them very closely to seek to increase the pace of that.
2,500 over 10 years? That's not a million miles off my finger in the air estimate, is it?
No, well that would be 5,000 homes. We're talking with government as well as.
That's what I said. I said, whoever is here in 10 years' time is looking at a number on Greenwich Peninsula that's maybe around 5,000, and you said you would dispute that. And then you've just given a figure which is 500 units every 2 years, which is over 10 years about 2,500.
No, sorry, forgive that. We're doing as much as we possibly can by bringing in those third parties. That also depends upon us being able to access support for infrastructure funding as well. So we have bid in through City Hall Developer Investment Fund because.
So those are all words. I'm trying to get some numbers, and my finger in the air estimate was maybe in 10 years' time there's about 5,000 homes somewhere there. Currently it's 3,200 or so. 3,000. What's my figure here? 3,478. Apologies. So 3,500 roughly on Greenwich Peninsula so far. And I suppose I'm saying, my pessimistic estimate is that we might get another 2,000 done over the next 10 years. And you said you disputed that, and you're shaking your head now. But when you gave some numbers, you were saying bringing a site forward every 2 years, and each site is about 500.
Because of we've inherited that contract, we have fewer controls in terms of the pace of development.
Okay.
Therefore, we are working to enhance those, but also to bring other parties involved so that numerous plots can be coming forward simultaneously. We are looking at proposals from third parties as GLAP directors and steering group, which supports that. Clearly, they need to go through the decision-making process, and it's subject to the market. Therefore, we'd want to be in a position where we are bringing forward one plot every year, at least. Therefore, it's difficult to put exact numbers on it, but we're looking at an excess of 5,000 would be the target in terms of what we could.
Okay, sorry, so perhaps I misheard then. I do apologise. So one plot, that's about 500 homes. I thought you said you were looking at about one plot every 2 years. and that would be 2,500 over 5 years. And but you're now saying you may get a plot every year. I'm trying to turn the words into numbers. You see, we're the budget committee, and I like numbers.
Yes, I understand it. It's looking at what controls we have and what ability in terms of what the minimum is and where we'd like to get to. So yes, we would like to be able to bring forward a plot every year.
Okay. Well, I suppose we will see in 10 years where we got to. Specifically, Barking Riverside, I don't think you said. So that's the other really big site. Planning permission now for about 20,000. Again, 3,200 started. Is that a similar story? I mean, lots of words, but what does that look like in terms of numbers 5 years from now, 10 years from now?
GLAP, a joint venture partner with L&Q, so Barking Riverside Limited, therefore on the board of that company, working through the business plan with Barking Riverside Limited at this point in time. And that is looking at forecast land sales and drawdowns and starts. Don't have the exact kind of numbers to give it. I'll look back through my notes, but there's a lot of work happening now on the board and working with Barking Riverside Limited and with L&Q to support delivery of those plots. I don't know if Adam would like to add anything else.
I think it's quite difficult in terms of long-term forecasting on delivery numbers because property is a very cyclical market and we are in a very difficult position at the moment. So if you look at just the financing rates, they have a double impact on delivery of housing schemes. Firstly, it increases the cost for the developer, but secondly, it constrains affordability for housing purchases. So you don't need much of a shift in financing rates to have a big impact on scheme viability. So the major things that will improve things is demand for is the price of the assets that we're selling. Demand for housing is a key factor, but that is also it's the delivery cost that the constructors are building at. So if you get a small reduction in finance rates, it not only improves the viability for the developer in terms of construction costs, but potentially increases the purchase price as well. The other factor that's been mentioned, and this is where we are looking at how to unblock schemes, is just in the scale of infrastructure costs, and this is applicable for both Greenwich and Barking Riverside, in terms of the costs that we are requiring the developments to fund. And so those are often the planning obligations, but these put significant financial burdens on scheme costs. So to the extent that we can look at how efficient we can be in delivering the infrastructure, or to seek alternative sources of funding, or to use parts like such a City Hall developer where we can get some lower financing rates into the scheme, all of these are the kind of measures that potentially unblock the delivery. But it does mean that forecasting and giving you exact numbers on delivery going forward is quite challenging.
Yes, I suppose that's why I used the sort of Tversky method of what have we been doing so far, and assuming that will continue. And people think that's too pessimistic, but optimism bias is a real thing. I suppose that's my concern, is we heard a lot of possibles. I mean, everything you've just said was true 10 years ago. Let me just quickly ask again about one more scheme. So the Stevenson Street, which is, I think, so far has only started about 20% of its homes. Barclay are the development partner there, and they've expressed, I'm not sure how to put it diplomatically, concern about what's going on in London and whether they feel able to continue operating in London. Are they continuing with Stevenson Street?
Yes, they are. They're committing. We're in active discussions with Barclay regarding Stevenson Street. So we work very closely with them as our partner there.
So discussions. So is it not underway and being built?
Yes, it is underway and being built.
Okay, so I just get slightly nervous when we're having discussions rather than...
Oh, no, and that was, there was a case study within our annual report, in fact, demonstrating the progress that has been made with Barclay at Stevenson Street.
Okay, sorry, Tim, did you want to...
Well, I was just going to make the general point, really, that, you know, all of these big schemes are kind of multi-phase schemes. So, yes, with Stevenson Street, we're absolutely underway and delivering on early phases, and we're in discussions with Barclay around the later phases. But with all of these schemes, we know the capacity of the sites because of the planning permissions which are there, but it is genuinely difficult to forecast the pace of delivery. It's also, you know, I've talked before, and just to make the point again, that it's also risky for us to be too definitive about what we want to see in terms of targets for pace of delivery because of the commercial world in which we're operating. And, we, in some senses, in some cases, we may have to wait. If the price isn't right and the deal isn't right that's being offered, we may need to reject that and kind of wait for a better offer from a commercial perspective. And we don't want to be in a position where, potential partners know that we're under pressure to deliver to a certain timescale, and that kind of affects the commercial position that we end up being in. So that's just where we come back to that.
No, I think all that's very fair. But this is my concern. You see, when I look at the research that came out in the autumn from, say, Molior, talking about how across vast swathes of London it's just not really viable. Obviously, viable is not viable for us as much as anyone else. It's a factor of build costs and either rents or sale prices. And so that just makes me quite pessimistic about what will get done. And I suppose I'm expressing to some extent my frustration about the fact of so little being done over, when the sun was shining, not so much hay was made, I suppose would be how I would put it. But we don't have a time machine, so we can't.
But and on that point, what Sarah said about the infrastructure under the ground at Greenwich Peninsula is really relevant, and it's the same thing at Barking. A huge stage of that, which was to enable the whole thing, was to get the station in place. It was a massive project in itself, a huge undertaking to get the finances for that together. But that was delivered and is in place and has been for a few years and has enabled some delivery. But, they were really important early phases of that project. These are complex brownfield sites which often need remediation and certainly have very significant infrastructure requirements before you can start building housing in earnest.
And what we also do is work very closely with our partners. So you talk about Stephenson Street with Berkeley. So last year, the outline planning permission was revised, so in 2025. So that increased the overall number of homes, also increased the level of affordable. There's a lot of work happening with officers to optimise these schemes in line with the Mayor's ambitions under the London Plan, and where possible to increase levels of affordable housing. But of course, viability is a key consideration to that too.
Okay, we'll come on to affordable housing actually. Assembly Member Hall.
I'll just be very brief. When we were talking about the peninsula, I heard 1.5 years as well. And I think there's lots of words, and we do understand the problems with building. We do, because we hear it all the time. But it is when we actually ask for numbers that suddenly all the talk stops, and then we get a confused picture. And bearing in mind, it is so very, very difficult to have any oversight of anything that goes on here. When we then get a disparity in numbers, when, on the peninsula, you did say 1.5, one every other year, then it was one every year. What is it? I mean, there's so little information that we've got that we can go on. And when the figures aren't given to us in the right way, it makes us very nervous about what's going on, because at the end of the day, it's a hell of a lot of money riding on all of this, and the years go by and we don't get the homes that Londoners need. I'll leave it at that, Chair. I know we're busy.
Thanks. Assembly Member Bahari.
I'm going to talk about the Silvertown investment. So, David, amazing amount of money, £100 million investment. That was announced by the Mayor. And the Mayor does do this quite a lot, where he makes a big announcement with very little detail. So let's dig into that detail. Can you tell us about this investment? Is it a loan? Is it a grant? What is the source of the £100 million investment? What impact will it have on the GLAP financial position?
Okay, so as I think we said earlier, Assembly Member, GLAP is the landholder here, and we have the relationship with the Silvertown Partnership, which is the joint venture that won the development agreement back in 2013. That development agreement gives us certain powers, like, for instance, consenting to changes in the membership of the joint venture, which we have done. And so really the story is that the original people in that joint venture back in 2013 already moved out, left a number of years ago, and Lendlease and Starwood came in to be the JV partners. Lendlease have been taking the project forward on that basis, and we have people now living on the site. The first phase was completed. late last year, which obviously is very welcome news. But Starwood were not keen to stay in the project, and it became clear that the only way, given the challenges, that this was going to be viable was for the public sector to step in. And so we're now in a place where the GLA has stepped in. As I say, it's not through GLAP, it's through a separate company, because we have to invest via companies, called GLA Housing Investments Silvertown, that has taken 50% of the partnership. And then the Crown Estate have come in alongside Lend-Lease into that partnership as well. So you have very significant public sector involvement. Essentially, the funding that was brought to bear, and if you need more detail, I'm sure Tim can probably get into it, was from Housing and Land Fund reserves. It's basically money coming back into the GLA from previous investments. And, from a GLAP perspective, this obviously is welcome news, because the receipt from that land as it develops is a very important part of our business plan. So from a strictly GLAP perspective, it's really good news that this is in place and that the project is set to push forwards.
So it's public sector money, so we should expect a time frame of how that investment is, and the expectations from the return of that investment should be made publicly available. We should be able to see exactly what your expectations will be from the return of that investment. Adam, anyone? Yeah.
The mayoral decision report that approved the investment in Silvertown does contain some of that information, so that the central forecast is for the scheme, based on the business plan, is that there will be the repayment of the 100 million equity, and I think there's a surplus of circa £60 million coming back to the GLA, assuming that the scheme delivers to the business plan, and the scheme is over a 20-year life.
And there's a time frame that you can share with us as well?
That the detail of exactly when those repayments were made would be made is not in the mayoral decision, but the time frame for the scheme, I think, is.
We're getting into the turf, Assemblymember, where it's things we're happy to talk about privately, but there'll be some limitations on what we can say publicly.
There's a lot of confusion over some of the details. I mean, the reporting of the percentage of affordable homes, for example, out of a 7,000 this investment might unlock. Can you confirm the actual specific public benefits that are attached to this £100 million investment? And I'd like to know about it in terms of affordable homes and also accessible homes.
I think the best place for some of the detail around the scheme is in the planning permission that exists, isn't it? And the current planning permission is for 7,000 homes with 25% affordable.
And accessible homes?
I mean, I don't know the answer to that.
So it's always accessible homes. We never have any data on these particular investments.
It would be designed to comply with the London Plan and with the local policy. So I don't have the precise figure here, but that is, of course, a key planning requirement and one which we always seek to achieve.
Right. I mean, that specific information is really important to me, and I know a lot of disabled Londoners would want to know more about it too. And this is also an investment that's going to establish the Singapore-style approach as well, which we heard a little bit about before. And one of the things that we've been pushing for from the London Assembly and from the Economy Committee is making sure there's family-friendly dwellings, that there's more housing that's suitable for families. And I think the Singapore style does support that. It has space for play, for example, within their developments. Is that a commitment that you'll be making with this Singapore style approach on the Silvertown project?
I think that for Silvertown, the planning permission is already in place, so the investment is to deliver against the planning permission which the joint venture has in place.
So are you just be clear, you're committing to a proper Singapore-style approach or not in terms of housing for families? I just want to be really clear on that.
I mean, I think the reference to Singapore style is more in the sense of investing into joint ventures and being more kind of active directly in housing delivery, which is what we're doing in Barking Riverside and in Silvertown, the two major joint ventures that we have.
Okay. I mean, I really, really wish you luck on the Singapore-style approach. I just hope it's not another mayoral gimmick. Because London deserves dwellings that fit the needs of London right now, which is exactly what we want. And I was really excited by the Singapore-style approach. I just really hope that it's something that is achievable and that we do have it.
I can give you an example. I was at St Anne's Hospital yesterday, which is a site that GLAP acquired in 2018. We were celebrating the first completion, so that's on the first phase. So that's 240 homes in the first phase. That's a scheme where it's 60% affordable housing. When we acquired it, it was consented at 14%, and there was only 417 homes. It's now short of 1,000, but it's mid-rise. There's significant landscape as part of the proposals, and also we're delivering a whole host of housing there. Of course, there's family housing, but there's also homes which are going to Haringey Council. There's homes which are going to key workers at the NHS, so adjacent to the site. There's also community-led housing, and I know, of course, that there's also accessible housing. So that's a real example where design has been very central and policy objectives have been very central to that scheme. And I'd also highlight that last year it received a Housing Design Award, which is evidence in itself of the quality of the scheme. So I'd also like to just highlight that as another GLAP scheme which embodies those characteristics.
Okay. Thank you. Hold your horses 1 second.
Moving on this side.
We're moving very slowly, I'm afraid. I was just going to say the benefit of Singapore-style housing is that it all has air conditioning, which is very topical for this week. Having been there, it's lovely. Can I just clarify, just on this 100 million? So the 100 million is GLA funding for a GLA joint vehicle that doesn't touch GLAP, and that has come from a reserve. Will we find that reserve when we look at the GLA accounts?
It's Housing and Land Fund resources that are invested through GLA Holdings into GLA Housing Investment Silvertown.
Got it. Okay. I'll just make it. I say we, the royal we, making a note of that here. Perfect. We'll have a short comfort break after the next question, but next but one question. Apologies. Assemblymember Desai, you wanted to come in quickly on this before we move on to Assemblymember Cooper.
Sorry, can I just ask the panel? So where are we with the AB, the site where AB people planning to sort of develop? Because I was a councillor on Newham's planning when ABP came with all sorts of promises, and and turned out the due diligence had never properly been done.
So that's Royal Albert Dock.
Yeah.
I mean, again, Sarah can say more, but we are out on a procurement process to find a new development partner following the departure of ABP.
Yeah, which was I think they departed. What was it, about 5 years ago?
It was not quite that long ago, but yes, close.
So ABP were chosen as our development partner in 2013, but it was in 2023 that we then terminated that arrangement with ABP. As Tim highlights, we're currently going through a competitive procurement exercise. In terms of next steps and timescales for that, we intend that a mayoral decision will approve the appointment of a preferred partner in December. In December of this year, so later this year.
I think ABP sold us many false promises, and turned out there's a lot of geopolitics involved. It was a Chinese sort of led company, and I won't say no more.
As I say, it does move all quite slowly. Assemblymember Cooper.
Hi. It kind of follows on very well from what Assemblymember Desai was just asking about, and a little bit from my comment earlier. And it's to do with our partners, and we've kind of had a few names of some of the larger partners have popped up in the meeting so far. We've talked about Lendlease, we've talked about Crown Estate, we talked about L&Q, we talked about Berkeley New Homes, we talked about Night Dragon. So obviously it's really important that GLA Land and Property, so this is aimed probably at Tim and Sarah, is able to track, to monitor how well our development partners, whether that's in a JV, a joint venture, or some other partnership arrangement, or someone who we've just contracted with, how well they're delivering. And we just talked about ABP not delivering. So how well are you able to track performance against agreed milestones and delivery outputs?
To say on the in terms of selecting a new partner to work with, so in the example of Royal Albert Dock, which is out to procurement now, one of the key tests of that will be the partner's delivery track record and their ability to do what they say that they're going to do, and that's one of the key tests. And then, as part of the mayoral development agreements that we go into with these partners, as part of these agreements, they are, especially the ones that we've put in place more recently, they have got a series of milestones which the partners need to meet to fulfil the terms of the agreement, and so those are tracked very closely to ensure that.
I mean, obviously, we know that market conditions are difficult. Since 2016, let's choose the last 10 years, obviously from 2019, the full impact of Brexit happened, and a lot of people decided to leave London who worked in construction. Then we had COVID in 2020. Then we've also had interest rate increases. All sorts of things have happened to impact. But I think all of us have been sort of picking up on the issue that some of the development partners have not been moving ahead as quickly as possible. So you're saying you're tracking it, but what are we able to do to encourage people to start to step up? Because otherwise, talking about achieving the 68,000 homes over 2 decades, that is looking, and I think the chair was sort of hinting that it's looking a bit difficult at current rates of progress. So are we really able to sit down with people and talk about what they're doing in terms of milestones and final outputs? Is that really happening?
Yeah, I think that's a really core part of the job of the people who effectively work for, as part of the GLA workforce, work for GLAP and are managing these relationships with partners every day of the week. And, firstly, starting with the milestones set out in the mayoral development agreements, as I was talking about, and really ensuring that those control mechanisms that we've got are used effectively, but then also engaging with partners where the situation has changed so significantly that the plans need to evolve over time. And I think that's a really, as people were talking about earlier, this is a part of property development. These things do come forward slowly and unfold over time, as at the same time as external situations changing. So, on a number of our schemes, we have in the end renegotiated milestones in the mayoral development agreements to enable the developments to continue going, but reflecting the circumstances within which we're operating. And those are some of the kind of commercial negotiations which we're having across different.
And I think for ordinary people who hear, on the one hand, the discussion that there's a housing crisis, and that's at pretty much every price point in the market. I mean, obviously, probably the most desperate people are people who are literally homeless or need social rented accommodation because there's so little of it. So people don't seem to understand they're on a housing waiting list, and it could be for 5 or even 10 years. I'm on the housing committee, so obviously we've heard a lot about that. But at the same time, we're also hearing from property developers that the market is very adverse and it's really difficult for us to go ahead. And I was talking to somebody the week before last who was saying, yes, we finished these one-bedroom flats, which is what we thought the market wanted when we started this development. And now we've got a lot of one-bedroom flats available for £600,000, which is what we need to sell them for to achieve our return on investment. And now we can't sell them. I'm not saying they are have been funded by the GLA or Housing and Land. So there's obviously a very difficult market situation. So you're talking about renegotiation. When that delivery is delayed, do we have any other options other than to renegotiate timescales?
I mean, the first step is to try and hold to the timescales that we've got. That's
Right.
what the control mechanisms are there to do. And but there is also a reality. There's a point at which we end up with a decision where either a development entirely stalls, or we find a way forward to enable it to continue. And it's the kind of, I guess, it's the judgment of the people in those relationships as to where we are in that spectrum, and what the right, our objective is always to try and ensure that housing delivery is maximised, and whether that's by strictly enforcing controls and holding to that, or whether that means compromising at some point to enable delivery to continue at the best rate possible is very much that commercial judgment.
So is setting up the City Hall developer part of a sort of change of approach to try and get things moving, to sort of crack some of these stalled projects or projects that are just being developed out incredibly slowly? I'm aware of one in Enfield, also on the Environment Committee, talking about heat networks, and the people from the heat network team were saying, well, we'd expected there to be 6,000 properties developed in this scheme in Enfield by now, but actually only 2,000 have been developed. Well, they were expecting a lot more than have been finished. 6 to 10,000, there's only 2,500 finished. Will the new City Hall developer have an impact on? Is this a change of approach that might unlock some of this stalled work?
So I think I slightly confused the situation earlier when I was answering a similar question around Sealtown. So, just being really clear, and David's already said this, there's GLAP's role as a landowner, and looking at, sites which and developments which are on GLAP land and using the mayoral development agreements which I was talking about. There's a wider housing and land role which we're looking to do to support development across London wherever possible, and there's a number of things that we're doing in that space. We've got this £324 million from government in terms of funding that we can put into development as grant or equity or loan, and we're just assessing bids into that. At the moment, clearly it's nowhere near enough to deal with the viability issues that exist in London at the moment, and we'll help schemes where we can, but there's a huge amount more demand than we'll be able to satisfy with that funding. Beyond that, we've got other funding programmes in terms of the Affordable Homes Programme, where we're again looking to get grant into homes to make sure that affordable housing can come forward, but again, demand for that vastly exceeds the amount of funding we've got available. And we've got other initiatives around, including the New Homes Accelerator, which is a new thing for London, which we're working on closely with government, which is really focused on stalled sites. We've asked all developers around London to give us information about sites which are stalled and the reasons for those, and we're looking to take a kind of multi-pronged approach where we can to try and help unlock that, whether that's with funding, as I've talked about, or in other ways, working with the regulators or other statutory bodies, which might be kind of where there might be delays coming into schemes, and so working really hard to try and unblock stalled sites where possible in lots of other ways, but that's kind of entirely outside of the GLAP.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I'm being a bit naughty because we've got you in front of us as the Executive Director for Housing and Land. I'm actually asking across the whole of your brief, but I think it's helpful for us to understand where GLAP sits in that wider picture. So I was going well beyond housing and land, GLAP into housing and land generally. Thank you, Chair.
You're very welcome. Right, so on that bombshell, we'll take a short comfort break. So by my watch, let's return at 12:05 with our final two sections of questions. Thanks, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. We're now resuming our Budget and Performance Committee meeting this morning, looking at GLA Land and Property Limited. Our next section of questions is on affordable housing with Assembly Member Small Edwards.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good afternoon, panel. My question is to David. What actions are being taken to align the level of affordable homes delivery with the Mayor's aspirations in that area?
Or Assembly Member, colleagues might want to comment in more detail, but it's something that our goal is on a site-by-site basis to get as much affordable housing as we can. And I think Sarah may have given an example earlier of where we've renegotiated, we've looked with the partner again at density, and we've managed to secure both, more affordable homes and a higher percentage of affordable homes on the site. And that's what we will continue to do. Obviously, theme of the day, incredibly challenging housing market and viability, and that sometimes does send the numbers in the direction we wouldn't want them to go in. But we're always, in our approach, are looking for ways to go further on that.
To give a couple of examples, since 2016, so I talked about St Anne's Hospital, where we acquired that site, disposed of it at 60% affordable housing. Another example is North Middlesex University Hospital in Enfield, where there was surplus land. So we acquired land there in 2019, and we took that to market with a minimum requirement of 50%. It's now 100% affordable housing and is going to be starting on site later this year. So that's a clear demonstration. And what we've also undertaken is to enter into a portfolio agreement. So that means that across a selection of sites, we will deliver 50% affordable housing. So some sites deliver more, some sites will deliver less, but with a floor of 35% affordable housing. That's published online, and we're currently outperforming on that, so it's above 50%. So those are some sort of tangible examples of what we're doing where we can to deliver on the Mayor's commitment for 50% affordable housing. And then those sites which are in contract, I gave an example of Stephenson Street where we increased the level there. We do what we can within our means to increase that.
Thank you. And then this follow-up might be towards you then, Sarah. But when we come to then the City Hall Developer Investment Fund, do you think that's going to be able to continue that work, expand on that work? How will the entry of the GLA as a developer itself impact on the affordable housing delivery in London?
Shall I come in there? I mean, I think with the City Hall Developer Investment Fund, we're yet to see what bids are going to be successful. So some of those might be for kind of equity investment potentially, but I suspect the lion's share will, we're looking for quick delivery as far as possible with that fund. So the lion's share is likely to be some grant where it's needed to fill viability gaps or for loan financing. I guess in Barking Riverside or Silvertown, where we are now, where the GLA rather than GLAP is a significant JV partner. As I said before, for Silvertown, we're looking to deliver against the planning permission which is in place, and the planning permission which is in place is for 25% affordable. That's a reflection of the realities of the viability on the site.
Thank you. This is more towards David, but our potential new Prime Minister has spoken about the need for regional authorities, public sector more broadly, to get more directly involved in house building, and that's something that was more the model in the post-war years. Is that something the Mayor is in agreement with, will be pushing for with the change of Prime Minister?
Absolutely. I think the whole point about City Hall Developer was a recognition that we need to be more activist, and that in general the market alone isn't meeting London's needs, and it certainly isn't at the moment, given the huge challenges that there are to viability of virtually any sort of material scheme in the city. And so absolutely the public sector needs to be on the pitch, helping to address that. And it's obviously clearly our view that that regional approach, noting that in the Localism Act, certain things were devolved from Homes England, as it now is, into the GLA, which really recognises how different the London property market is compared to much of the rest of the country. And so, yeah, we absolutely want to do that. We await to see what Andy Burnham's plans are and how that will play out. And obviously, we will, be engaging with the new government closely and trying to secure the best we can for London, just as we have on, getting the funds for City Hall developer in the first place.
Thank you. We've often heard in the Assembly, whether it be on Planning Committee, on Housing Committee, about the perfect storm that housing development has faced the last 4 or 5 years now. What difference would it make, the GLA being a development partner or a developer itself versus a private sector development, when the GLA face a lot of the same issues that everyone else is facing?
I think it's a question of what we bring, and colleagues might have thoughts, but I would certainly pick out, it's, our ability as, to vote things from a public sector finance perspective is different. Different private sector partners will obviously have their own commercial pressures, and we're in a different environment and can, the finances have got to add up, but we can sometimes take wider social goals into account in what we do. So I think that's a very important part of it. And, I think the other thing really is our ability to bring partners together, public, private, housing associations, etc., and try and support and work through challenges. And we're very well placed to do that in a way that an individual private developer might sometimes find harder.
Thank you. And obviously we saw the London County Council in the first few decades of the 20th century building a huge number of homes, but a lot of that building and then the building post-war via development corporations was done on the basis that you could borrow against the future revenues that you'd be receiving from the properties that you'd built. Obviously, in the GLA's case, where it's not actually managing the properties, that potentially doesn't exist. Do you think that's a potential flaw in this model?
So we can borrow wherever we can, the CFO is comfortable that we can prudently repay those borrowings. Yeah. So clearly, as an example, the then CFO took a decision back in 2012 that, we were okay to take on this land and the associated borrowings because prudently, we would get the assets and we would be able to fund the borrowing from that. And that same test applies to anything in future. And, there is nothing that prohibits us from saying, well, okay, we're going to borrow money, but we, for capital purposes, but you have to have that high degree of confidence that you're going to be able to repay it, because otherwise your wider service delivery is put at risk because your number one priority is to meet your borrowings. And so it's got to be something that's considered very carefully. And, in a lot of cases, that's why it makes sense. So at Barking Riverside, we've got a partnership with L&Q, who obviously are, very significant housing association, and looking after tenants and sites, once built is what they do. And so, got to be open-minded, but we can only, proceed on borrowing where we have that high degree of confidence.
Thank you. I think what I'm potentially getting at is that maybe it would be easier to borrow if we were managing them more directly. And obviously housing associations, as you know, have faced so many pressures in the last few years regarding remediation works. So whether it could be more effective if the GLA could act more independently is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I mean, it's from a point of view of borrowing, it's all about your confidence in your ability to pay it back. And, whether the actual day-to-day management was done by a social registered provider, a for-profit registered provider, something that the GLA set up, probably doesn't really impact that. It's ultimately, a business case around, can we do that? And what often we find at borrowing is to say, well, look, it's pretty likely we're going to get that back, but we need to cater the circumstance where we don't. Yeah, and under accountancy rules, that means making a revenue provision. Yeah, and would mean tying up a significant amount of public funds in reserve in case things go wrong. And that's the challenge about this is for absolutely right reasons, the requirement to be prudent means that, we have to put revenue funds away, and they've got to come from somewhere, and that's one of the challenges.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Actually, just reflecting on what you were saying there, not to hark back to the loan, but about the prudential borrowing. Would I be right then in thinking that the interest that would have, obviously the GLA has borrowed that money, I think, from the PWLB for this is the £300 million 2012-13 loan, I mean now. Obviously, they had an assumption about what the interest would be based on a schedule that started in 2018. The effectively the unpaid interest, is that just compounding at GLAP and ultimately will still be paid?
The interest is paid every year to the GLA, so it's not compounding. It's an annual interest payment. So even though at that time when the loans weren't repaid, the interest was always being paid on those loans.
Okay, yeah, it just suddenly struck me, David, as you were talking about the burden on the GLA.
And it's just worth saying that obviously for the GLA, that's a debt, but how the GLA manages it is part of the wider Treasury management strategy, and the GLA obviously has cash in the bank, and it manages strategically when it's most cost effective to borrow, when it's most cost effective to use cash that we already have that we know is going to be spent in future and other purposes. And that's what what London Treasury do for us, is just ensure that we get the most efficient approach. And as we said, this particular debt is very low interest, and so it's not in any way a problem like it would be if it was a real high interest loan.
Those loans are fixed interest rates, so that was
yes.
the nature.
So, apologies. So I didn't want to dwell too long on this. All that information, I think it was 2.8% or something, was in the original MD as a PWLB loan in 13 years ago. Assembly Member Bahari.
Thank you. So, David, you're not going to be surprised by the question I'm going to give you, because it's again about disabled Londoners and making sure that housing is affordable to them, but also accessible, because affordability isn't the only public benefit. So what targets does GLAP have for accessible, adaptable and wheelchair user homes? And why is GLAP not reporting or recording how many homes are completed are usable for disabled Londoners?
So we seek to deliver on the London Plan policies regarding accessibility. So that is what we seek to achieve. I take your point in terms of reporting and recording, and that's something that we could take away and look at going forward.
So you're going to take away the need to make sure that we have this. I just want to be clear on this. We don't have the data, but we want to get the data.
So we require our partners to comply with the London Plan, particularly in relation to this requirement. So that is what happens to ensure it's policy compliant in line with the London Plan. We do not record or report on it in terms of number of units, but what I'm saying is that's something we could take away and review.
Right. Okay. So at some point, do we think we will get that data? Is that what you're saying? That we will get that information? Is that what you're saying?
That is something that we can do when looking at what we're reporting against, yes.
Okay. That would be good news, because that data is so necessary, and it's something that's been missing. It's critical information that we still don't have. And Tim, once we do get that information, will GLAP commit to publishing that accessible home data in future for annual reports alongside the affordable stats and completions?
Yeah, I think that's what Sarah's saying, that we'll have a look at how we could do that, yeah.
So that's a yes, is it?
Yes, we will take that away and look at that. And as part of recent procurement activity as well, we require as a mandatory requirement for our partners to complete an equality, diversity and inclusion action plan. So it's not only what are they doing in terms of policy compliance, but it's what they're doing over and above that with working with new communities. So that is something that we do across all of our new procurements.
Right. Well, I look forward to seeing that, because this is something that I've been really frustrated with, that we just don't have that data. And I know disabled Londoners have been desperate to find it, to get that information. Thank you.
Thanks. Assemblymember Hamdash.
Just to piggyback off Assemblymember Bukhari's comments, I know Inclusion London have been lobbying really hard for this data, for the level of transparency. So I'd really urge perhaps having a conversation with Inclusion London to see, and they have thoughts on how this data can be best presented, because it's something that they've been lobbying really extensively, and they are the voice of disabled Londoners really effectively, and I think they'd be really helpful in how to deliver that data. So, a question for Tim. What accounts for the difference between the GLAP starts reported in the GLA housing statistics and those reported in the GLAP annual report?
It's Sarah and I were discussing this earlier. It is complex, but we are confident in the figures. Effectively, we've got different programmes. So some of the homes which GLAP which are delivered on GLAP land are funded via the Affordable Homes Programme, and so would form starts under that programme. Some of them would also be funded through our investment partners as well. So, they are complex subsets, and I would suggest we probably should write to you to set out exactly how those subsets kind of come together to make up the numbers, because it is, it's hard to talk about.
And it's all around double counting, because the affordable homes are delivered through the Affordable Homes Programme, typically with our partners. They are counted as a direct output through the Affordable Homes Programme, so we don't want to count them twice then through GLAP. So it gets quite technical in terms of the reporting. So I'd encourage you to look at our GLAP annual report for the full figures in terms of what we are delivering across both private and affordable homes. And of course, through the Building More Homes delivery plan as well, that's the key public reporting in terms of what GLAP is delivering moving forward.
I think we can set this out in a way which is simple to understand, hopefully.
More broadly, I'm aware that Shelter launched a campaign recently asking the government to look at writing off historical debt to allow local authorities to build more homes, particularly in kind of reaction to the 2012 debt that a lot of local authorities inherited. Do you think there's any role here for the GLA to similarly benefit from any schemes? Do you think more debt relief from government would help you deliver more homes?
I think this is a question about local authority HRA reform, isn't it? Which wouldn't be applicable to GLAP.
I mean, I think what I would say, Assembly Member, is that, if you're saying like GLAP has got debts, well, what if the government wrote them off? I mean, I guess what I'd say is, look, more money is inherently helpful because you can do more with it. But actually, as we've said, the debts we've got are at a very low interest rate, and so using money to pay off those debts, then going, now we can borrow more to do the next thing, and that will be at a higher interest rate, would be the wrong thing to do. So, I mean, yes, like more funding in from national government is clearly something we want, but it's not necessarily the case that we want to be thinking that in terms of the GLAP debt, because theme of the morning. If we deliver against what is planned for these sites, then repaying that debt will take care of itself.
That's really helpful, thank you. And then I know, Sarah, earlier you mentioned the St Anne's model positively. More generally, is that a scheme that you're looking to replicate more across London? How much does it factor into your broader GLAP thinking?
Both St Anne's and North Middlesex were acquired using the Mayor's Land Fund, which is funding through government. So this is an example where GLAP has helped facilitated GLA investment and money from government. So that would be very much dependent upon future money coming through to enable us to make future acquisitions. Although we're talking with partners about building that pipeline, such as through the London Land Board and our relationships with the public land team as well. But it isn't a successful example by virtue of recent completions, design quality, and us being able then to write in minimum requirements in terms of what we expect, the quality we expect, as well as the timescales for delivery.
do welcome this approach of public land providing public benefit, and it does strike me that the NHS are one of the bodies that are a bit more publicly minded in this respect, and so it is positive. And I've noted that aspiration of the London board. One thing I would observe, though, that it feels like there's a trend for a lot of parts of government to try to dispose land for the maximum profit possible. Now, I think of Islington. You have 26 flats behind Pentonville Prison. For years, Islington Council has been lobbying the Ministry of Justice to provide that to Islington Council so that it can provide social housing. And for years, the Conservative government didn't do that. However, the Labour government very quickly sold that off to a private developer. So I guess what kind of conversations can you have with public bodies so that public land isn't being used to cross-subsidise underfunded public services? How can you have effective conversations so that the public benefit is at the forefront?
I think that's more of a wider GLA point rather than a GLAP, but I can bring some reflections in. What we have recently published is called the London Development Toolkit, and that draws on GLAP's own experience through delivery as well as across the GLA group more broadly. It's very much targeted to public landowners who are looking at disposing of sites and sets out the various options and different levels of risk profile, but really what that's trying to demonstrate, and through the use of case studies through GLAP schemes, is how you can secure broader benefits as well as securing a receipt. So to go through one of those routes to dispose of sites as opposed to disposing them with no control or with no conditions in the open market. So that's very much the approach we take on both our residential and our non-residential sites to ensure that we are extracting those benefits for Londoners. So it's through that guidance that we've sought to then share that knowledge and share that expertise. So that's been drawn upon with officers across the GLA group, but also with professional advisors and with the Mayor's design advocates as well, because we recognise that quality is important as well as the commercial receipt.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. That's a very good point, actually, David, about the debt forgiveness, of the fact that it might actually just lead us to have to reborrow the same money at a higher interest rate. And so sometimes these very appealing sounding soundbite policies it turns out to be more complicated than that when you dig into it. Can I just quickly ask Tim, I appreciate that you said it's complicated, but so for example, if we look at the GLA housing stats, when it says 0 affordable starts in 24/5 and 25/6 for GLAP, but GLAP itself said that they had affordable starts, presumably that means that the GLAP affordable starts were not through the Affordable Homes Programme, but something else like Section 106 or something? Or
Where it says 0 affordable starts for GLAP under the Quarterly Affordable Homes Programme,
yes,
that is because those starts are counted through the Affordable Homes Programme. So if we were to have them as GLAP starts, they'd be double counted.
I've got you. I see. So the extra line on the spreadsheet doesn't record them under GLAP. They're already recorded under the headline AHP.
Yes, that's
got it.
right.
Yeah, I see the problem that you're talking about now. And so then the number that's in the GLAP annual report of, I don't know, 133 or 200, that's the correct number, and that's already included in the AHP figure. Got it. Yes, I see the
Yeah,
the snap.
but we can write to you to clarify because I appreciate it can be confusing.
Yeah. Okay. I think that brings us to our, I don't see any other hands, so our final section, which is governance. Assembly Member Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. We got into governance and oversight arrangements a bit earlier on. I'd like to dig into it a little bit further. And one of the areas is about the level of public reporting on delivery progress, delays, financial risks and changes to expected outputs, going back to my previous question. Do you feel, and I'm going to post this to Tim first and then maybe Sarah might want to come in, do you feel that GLAP is sufficiently transparent about all of those areas? Because obviously this is of huge public interest.
Yeah. You know, it has been a focus for us over the last few years to really be absolutely as transparent as we can be. You know, we've wanted to increase transparency, and so we have taken steps, including the publication of the annual report, which, you know, wasn't in place before, to do exactly that. You know, is this balance between transparency and commercial sensitivity? But, you know, we continue to try and push towards more transparency wherever possible. And, you know, are open to continuing to think about what more we could publish.
I mean, I guess the issue that, and you will have heard it reflected in a number of points that have been put to you this morning, is that whilst we recognise the need to be, commercial in confidence and not to sort of undermine markets or, set hairs running and all those sorts of things, and to be able to have, those private discussions where you're in these partially private arrangements, because there is so much public money involved, we feel very strongly, and obviously we are a committee of scrutineers, that we want maximum levels of transparency. Do you think there's anything else that you could be doing to add to that transparency? I'm going to give you a for example. We understand that the risk register includes a number of risks that are rated as more difficult, shall we say, but that risk register is not in public. Is that something that you would ever consider making public, or is it something that you might share with us on a more private basis? Because we have had those arrangements with other parts of the GLA family previously.
I mean, I think at an overall level, we'd want to ensure that the annual report does cover the risks that GLAP is facing. And I think we are doing that in the annual report. I think it's those scheme level risks where things do become more sensitive, and the offer's been made that we have a private discussion around those individual schemes, and so we can talk through where those schemes are in the delivery and the risks that they face.
I think that's something that most of us would really welcome. I know I would, and I'm going to pass back to the chair at this point. I'm sure he might want to nail that down with you. Thank you.
Assemblymember Hall.
Yeah, thank you. Can you tell me what are GLAP's actual operating costs? I appreciate it's not going to be the same as the OPDC or NLDC, but what are the costs?
I guess that we have a number of costs. I guess Adam might be trying to get out the specific figures in terms of staffing. So GLAP doesn't employ anybody, but it uses GLA staff time, and that's the core team is 23 people, and the staffing cost is 2.4 million. On top of that, we use TfL's estate management team to look after the sites that are in our ownership, obviously health and safety being absolutely critical. And so that's the kind of core internal staffing. And then obviously beyond that, we have external firms, for instance, doing the day-to-day duties on particular sites, security and so forth. And then there'll be costs associated with taking forward individual development projects, maintenance of buildings where we own them, which we will collect rent against, and so on and so forth.
Yes, so I can give you some figures from last year's accounts. So the administrative costs, so the general staffing, IT and other overheads were 6.65 million. Professional fees, which would generally be advisors and other expert advice on development schemes, 1.877 million. And then the other big line of expenditure is the estate management costs. So this is all of our activities to manage the investment portfolio, sites and development where we may have security and other arrangements and service charges, and that was 8.24 million.
Good Lord, that's quite substantial, isn't it? So you don't employ anybody, but it costs 6.65 million for staffing. Is that correct, Adam?
That figure isn't just for staffing. It's things like our accommodation costs that we are recharged by the GLA, the IT services, insurance. So that's the wider general overhead for the organisation.
So I take the 2.4 million then that David gave me. 2.4 million that is recharged to the GLA. Or recharged back from it. You know what I mean. I know what I mean.
Staffing is within that, and that isn't far that. I haven't got the exact figure, but that isn't that far from the actual number.
Okay. I know the chair wants to finish. I have got quite a few more questions. If I put them to you, you'll be able to give us the answers, will you? Yep. Lovely to hear. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
See any other indications? So on that basis, I think we'll wrap up that item. Thank you very much to our panel of 4 experts this morning for our answers on GLAP. We have a couple of bits of housekeeping just before we're quite finished. So can I ask the committee to note the report and the discussion and delegate authority to me as chairman in consultation with party group lead members to agree any output arising from the meeting? Next one's long, I'm afraid. Can I ask the committee to note the Mayor's decision lists for the period 13th of February to the 12th of March 2026 and the 29th of May 2026, previously made available as background papers to the relevant Mayor's reports to the Assembly, and decide whether to highlight any issues for detailed consideration? Noted. Good. Can I ask the committee to note the quarterly monitoring reports? Can I ask the committee to note its work programme? The next meeting of the committee is scheduled for the 16th of September 2026, 10 a.m. here in the chamber in City Hall. I have no urgent business, so that concludes today's meeting. Thank you very much.